pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great, wonderful country of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face that affects so much of our lives. And we have a discussion about this phenomenon of our age and what we can do about it, what we can do to change hearts and minds, and what we can do to change the culture in which we live so that we can be great once again in our families and homes, and great once again in our communities, and therefore be great once again as a nation. This is still a wonderful place, still the last best hope for freedom on earth, but we're in trouble. We're in pretty deep trouble. And as the events of this past week once again demonstrate, our freedoms depend so much on character. When people of good character are left to their own devices and left alone by their governments and allowed to prosper, wonderful things, great things indeed, can happen. But when people of poor character take license and abuse the freedoms that they have, there's always trouble. And this always invites government and other entities to try and micromanage our lives with rules and regulations and constrictions on our freedom that only tie our hands, but do nothing really. They really don't do anything to keep us safe. Every law that we pass, every rule that we put into place, every regulation that we impose, they all depend on the willing compliance of people of good character to work. People of bad character, they always find a way around the rules. It's just a sad, sad lesson that we have to keep learning over and over and over again. And today, being Father's Day, a special day, I want to give a special shout out to those fathers out there who take that responsibility seriously and who don't just try and impose a set of values on their sons and daughters, but rather live them out. demonstrate by their own example their commitment to certain values, principles, and ideals. Values and principles and ideals that make it all work. To those out there who shoulder that responsibility, lovingly and with goodwill and with no regret, who embrace those responsibilities lovingly. To those of you who take this task of fatherhood, this supreme duty of parenthood, seriously. A big shout out to you. We owe a debt of gratitude to you. This is what makes it all work. We're strong as a country when our families are strong. And as we hear time and time and time again, when these tragic events happen, like happened this past week in South Carolina, all we have to do is look at this family, this troubled family. To me, the real amazing thing sometimes is that children turn out halfway decently okay, despite all of the difficulties that they experience in their rearing. Despite sometimes the abuse and the neglect that's there, despite oftentimes the elements of our culture that promote all the negative things that destroy good character development. It's remarkable to me that in the face of that, there are still individuals who grow up to be fine young men and women. It's just amazing to me. But more often, it's the case that broken minds come from broken homes. Broken hearts and spirits come out of broken environments, dysfunctional environments. And we simply have to do a better job. We just have to do a better job of confronting one another and dealing with one another about the most important issue that faces us, and that is our character and our character development. Everything hinges on that. If you want to join the conversation tonight, I'm happy to have you join. I welcome your comments and your questions. Give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. If you're a father who has some thoughts on fatherhood, maybe you've been down the road of family dysfunction. Maybe it took all that you could do to get your act together, so to speak, and be the kind of father that you wanted to be to your children. If you have a story to tell, a question to ask, perhaps you're a product of a dysfunctional family. Perhaps you know firsthand and can share firsthand how broken homes can break hearts and create broken spirits and cause dysfunction. Or perhaps you just have another story to share. Perhaps you have a comment you'd like to make on the tragedies of this past week. Whatever the case, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 717-8296. Want to mention that I have completed a series of articles on my blog at manipulative-people.com this week. And you'll find last Friday's post quite interesting, I hope. It's about the interrelationship between character and the kinds of psychological problems that get presented to mental health professionals of one type or another, professional counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical social workers, individuals who are in the helping professions, see a wide range of problems, but at heart, there are very few individuals. This is a very rare circumstance where an individual is of absolutely solid character and some horrible tragedy occurs and really throws them for a loop. This does happen. This does happen. And in such cases, even the best of us can have a hard time weathering the storm, especially if the storm is intense and long-lasting. We should all pray that we don't have to face some of the catastrophic events that some families, some individuals have had to face in their lifetime. But in any case, there are those occasions where the bottom falls out, where the world just collapses in front of us, and it causes us to go into a downward spiral where our normal coping resources just don't do it anymore, and we find ourselves in trouble. Maybe we find ourselves anxious or depressed or just troubled or wearied or not ourselves, uncharacteristically angry, short-tempered. Our sleep gets interrupted. We have thoughts that we don't usually have. That can happen. But those kinds of things are actually very rare. It's very rare that someone comes to a mental health professional who is absolutely rock solid in character and for whom the bottom has fallen out of their lives through absolutely no fault of their own. And they just can't cope for some reason or another. Stress is just too great. And even though it's a rare circumstance, when it does happen, the prognosis is absolutely wonderful. Why? Because all you really have to do is help a person of decent, strong character to get through that difficult time. Sometimes it feels good just to have the catharsis, to get some things off your chest, to tell another human being the things that you're struggling with. The prognosis in these cases is very good because the person works through their issues. They recover their normal, good level of functioning, and before you know it, they're back on the road to health and happiness. Such cases are very rare. What's more often the case, and I make this point in my blog post of this past Friday on manipulativepeople.com, what's more often the case is that there is some aspect of character that's troubling in a person, and that makes them vulnerable to certain kinds of situations and events. So when someone comes to a mental health professional's office, it's incumbent upon the professional to really not just pay attention to whatever the person is saying their problem is. Maybe they're anxious, maybe they're a little depressed, maybe they're going through a difficult time, maybe their marriage is having trouble, maybe they're having problems at work. It's incumbent upon the clinician not just to look at what is going on right now that's causing situational stress. What's really important to look at is what's this person like overall, in good times as well as bad. How are they put together? What's their character all about? What's their level of conscientiousness? What are their attitudes toward things? How do they deal with their fellow men and women? What kind of respect do they have among those that they work with, among those they live? These are the questions that really we need to be asking, because inevitably, more often than not, what turns out to be the case is that the real problems stem not so much from the situational circumstances that are prompting a higher degree of stress at the moment, but the real problems have to do with the person's general character. And once that is addressed directly, things don't just get better for the moment, they get better for the long term. Now, in this case in South Carolina, this tragic, tragic case, this young man, for all his troubles and all of his troubled soul, by all accounts, this was a person of deeply flawed and troubled character. And everyone around him knew it. This, I think, folks, is just another tragedy that compounds the senseless tragedy that this truly disturbed character inflicted. This character, by the way, who in his confession and during his arraignment did not evidence any remorse, made it clear what his intentions were. Coldly, cruelly, without qualms, without conscience. And therein lies the problem. And right off the bat, right from the beginning, you can almost predict these things. Right off the bat, people started talking once again about the availability of guns, about certain aspects of our culture. All of these things are legitimate arguments. But folks, we cannot legislate our way out of this problem. I've said this time and time and time again, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to sound like a broken record for those of you who can remember the era where there really were records that when broken would cause the needle on the player to skip and repeat and repeat and repeat. I'm going to sound like that. There is no way we will ever be safe merely by A, restricting our freedoms even more, and B, the way we do that, the way we do restrict our freedoms, is through imposing more rules and regulations. There's no law that can keep us safe. No law. We're deluding ourselves. We're truly delusional to think that we can legislate our way, that there is a political solution to this crisis that we're in. There isn't. There is no other way to save us. None. The only way that we will be a community again, the only way that we will be great again, is to tackle the issue and to tackle it head on. And the issue is character. It's not guns or their availability, although it's perfectly fine to have a debate about that. It's not that there are not enough laws. Yeah, I've heard one of two things about this Roof character, this truly demented character who committed these crimes. I've heard that Roof, Dylan Storm Roof, by the way, is his name. I've heard that his father purchased this gun for him as a birthday present. But I've also heard, and these are conflicting reports, and from different sources, also heard that he bought the gun himself, that this young man did, and that he paid for it with money given to him from his father for that purpose. But in any case, if he bought the gun himself, given the fact of his history and his trouble, he shouldn't have been able, under the law, to buy the gun. And how many times do we see these things happen? Where we put rules and restrictions into place and we think they'll protect us and they don't. Happens time and time again. Here's another perfect example. Another classic example. We think if we build these monstrosity maximum security units, these prisons that we call supermaxes, and we encase them in layers and layers of concrete, and we put them out in very remote areas of the country, and we monitor people constantly, and we keep them in solitary confinement, we think we're safe. We think we're safe. And then we have these two horrible characters who escape with the help of another troubled character whom they were able to manipulate. Now, you can't look at these things day after day, week after week. You just can't look at these things so constantly and not see the handwriting on the wall unless you are just in the deepest case of denial known to man. Character always is the culprit. It's always the culprit. You have to be able to count on the people. If you're going to build a supermax prison, a maximum security unit, you have to be able to count on the people that you staff it to not be people who would, for one reason or another, have something in their character that would allow them to be witting or unwitting accomplices to an escape of some of the most dangerous people on the planet. When I say witting or unwitting, there are people who can get played for dupes. There are also people who have their own issues, their own character flaws, significant character flaws. In the case of this prison break, the woman involved had enough of a conscience in the end that she got cold feet about participating fully in the escape plan. But she did enough damage. She did enough damage. And God forbid that these two killers leave a trail of blood before they're caught and put back behind bars. But whether it's that tragedy or the tragedy that occurred in South Carolina this past week, or any of the things that so often make the headlines these days, whether it's a bad cop gunning down an unarmed person in the street because of attitudes that they harbor towards certain groups but won't admit, or it's somebody who is sworn to protect us from the most dangerous folks on the planet and then aids and abets, or it's somebody like Roof, who in his sense of superiority and in his bigotry and in his heartlessness, in his lack of empathy, can compartmentalize any emotion for those folks that he deems in his great and infinite wisdom to be inferior, and therefore, without regret and without remorse, take the lives of 9 innocent people. Whether it be any of those things, it always comes down to character. We have a serious, serious problem in this country. We have a culture, a cultural atmosphere that promotes character dysfunction, even rewards it. We have an economic, not an economic system, but we have an economic culture, a business culture that promotes and even rewards, often, character disturbance. And because we have so much character disturbance, we continue to erode and degrade our culture. We continue to create a culture that fosters the wrong things in our development. It's a vicious cycle. I have talked about this on several programs. I'll keep saying it. And what I don't see is I don't see the outrage toward the problem. I see folks ranting and raving all the time about the relatively irrelevant things that they think will help with the problem, but nobody talks about the problem. Depending on their political slant, I will hear people talking about gun rights and the need to abridge them. I hear people talking about uh, gun-free zones, whether we should have gun-free zones or whether we should have armed guards on duty. You know, I see the reason for the debate. The fact is that these uh, mass murderer wannabes, these wannabes who want to make from a name for themselves, they always go to places where they know that they can act with impunity. They always go to the schools, churches, or places where they know there isn't somebody right there ready to take them out because they want to be in control. They want to be in total control. It's a complete, total power trip for these spineless, characterless individuals. It's a way that these, and I will use the term, and I realize that it's demeaning and pejorative. I understand that, and perhaps it's my anger at this situation showing. I don't think it is, because in reality, most of these folks are truly losers in life because they haven't gotten it together yet. They haven't put what they need to put together to function as decent people. They haven't gotten their character act together. And therefore, they're not doing well. And they know it. And to make themselves feel better about themselves and to exercise some sense of superiority over someone else, and it doesn't matter the group that they're targeting. Could be any group that they have disdain for. Anyone to feel superior toward. Anyone to help take the sting out of being such losers that they are. These individuals target the defenseless. It's a complete and total power trip. They want to be in control. They don't want the chance. They do not want to take the chance that they could be taken out not on their own terms. If they're going to be taken out, if they're going to go down in flames, in a blaze of glory, then they'll do that themselves. And we've seen that time and time again, where the shooters, just as the police arrive, or just as it's clear the jig is up, they will take their own lives. And it's not because they're so horribly depressed and hurting inside. That's not usually what's going on. Like I said, these events are total power trips, pure power trips for the most disturbed characters. And they just want to be on top and in control in some way. And they've chosen this sick, sordid way to do it because they're losing at everything else. So what happens is that when their number is up, when the jig is up, when the law is on the scene and it's all about to come crashing down, they will take themselves out. Because they're not going to relinquish power or control. They're not going to have to admit their loser status. It's a real shame. So when these things happen, When these things happen, I cry twice inside. I cry for the innocent victims. I cry for the innocent victims. We need to pray for their souls. But I cry a second time for our country. And because we haven't yet decided, as a country, that we will make character our priority once again. That we will be great because we will be great individuals. And that we will confront character disturbance when we see it. I can't count the number of times. Oh, by the way, I should interrupt myself here because I get carried away, but I've got a lot more to say on this. But if you want to chime in, you have something you want to contribute to the discussion, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the topic. But one of the things I'd like to really point out here is that whenever these tragedies occur, when you look at the news reports or when you see news reports on TV or listen to them on the radio, you always hear similar kinds of things. You hear one of two things. You hear from people who say, especially in these mass shooting cases, you hear from folks who say, oh, I would never have thought this person seemed the most normal so-and-so, but never saw it coming, basically. And then the other thing you hear is, yeah, this person was a little off, or this person was a little weird. Not off in the sense of mentally ill, although the media has a habit of casting it that way. You know, it does our hearts just a little bit better to think that anybody that would do such a thing has to be mentally ill. But that's not often the case. More often is that we're dealing with an issue of character. And more particularly, a couple of aspects of character that really make all the difference. It's part of this phenomenon that we call psychopathy or sociopathy. It's this truly malignant narcissism, this sense of entitlement, this sense of superiority, this part of a person's character that allows them to take license and to do as they please without regard to the impact on others. And coupled with that sense of entitlement and those other features of malignant narcissism, coupled with that is a supreme lack of empathy and a supreme lack of remorse. A really deficient conscience. You know, there's a book out by Robert Hare, one of the best books on psychopathy for the lay person to read. And the title of the book is Without Conscience, because psychopathic individuals are best described as those with having such impaired consciences that you could say that conscience is virtually absent altogether. But the fact is, folks, that we have a lot more disturbed characters out there than pure psychopaths. That's why I posted the series of articles that I just did on the continuum of character disturbance on my blog at manipulativepeople.com. And if you haven't gone there yet, go to manipulative-people.com, read the articles. If you haven't gotten my books yet, In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, and the Judas Syndrome, you need to get them, you need to read them. Some shameless self-promotion here. It will turn your heart and your mind around. That's what I wrote them for. It will give you a new perspective and hopefully inspire you. That's why I wrote them. In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, and the Judas Syndrome. Those are my 3 books. And that's why I have the blog at manipulative-people.com. And that's why I have the series of articles there. And the reason, once again, is that these extreme psychopathic characters, without any conscience at all, and without empathy at all, these, fortunately, are rare character types. The tragedy is, however, that there is a spectrum of character disturbance out there that all too many people fall along. There are folks who are somewhere along the spectrum, not quite psychopaths, not quite sociopaths, but they have enough of those features to make them dangerous. Not just dangerous in the sense of having the potential to shoot up a school or a church like this crazy person, Roof, did. And by the way, I shouldn't say crazy person because he's not crazy. Truly character disturbed, no doubt. Crazy, no. So my point is that we live in an age where even though somebody might not be a full-blown psychopath or sociopath, they may still have a degree of character disturbance that makes them dangerous, and not just to do those kinds of far-out things like we've witnessed the past couple of weeks, but enough character disturbance to make it impossible for them to live with someone, to build a good relationship, to be a good parent, to be a good spouse. And that's the tragedy of our time. The tragedy of our time is that we have so much character disturbance of some degree out there. And I don't see the outrage about it. I hear outrage expressed about guns. I hear outrage expressed against attitudes. I hear outrage expressed against states who fly the Confederate flag, which I think is really pretty dumb. Anyway, I hear all kinds of outrage, except for the thing that's killing us. And that is this vicious cycle of character disturbance and the culture that fosters it. When are we going to wake up? How many shootings will it take? I don't know. I don't know. But I know that sooner or later, it has to happen. Sooner or later, the decent folks among us are really going to get sick and tired of having their freedoms abridged and having more burden heaped on their shoulders, more and more and more burden heaped on their shoulders, because there are so many of us who can't function responsibly. sooner or later, the good among us are going to get really fed up. At least I pray that that's true. You know, anger is a very misunderstood emotion. Nature gave us anger for one reason and one reason only: to propel us to change our environment in a way that removes a threat to our existence. It's meant to mobilize us. And I'm using this phrase metaphorically now, but sometimes we are just really, really meant to go to war. I said metaphorically. What I mean by that is sometimes we're really, really meant to mobilize ourselves in such a way that we'll stop at nothing to win. And for a noble, just cause, that's a good thing. And anger is what will mobilize us. So anger is a poorly understood emotion. Channeled well and channeled with principle, anger serves us well. But I don't see the outrage. I don't see the outrage for the problem that we have. I don't see people nailing the problem for what it is, pinpointing it with precision. It's character. It always has been. It will be. It's our downfall right now. It's killing us. And it only takes a few really severely disturbed characters to do an awful lot of damage. To do an awful lot of damage to our spirit, to our society, to our communities. It only takes a few really disturbed characters, conscience deficient characters, empathy lacking characters, conscience impaired to the point that they can, in cold blood and without remorse or regret, inflict untold pain, even on the innocent. And as I said earlier, I hear so often one of two things when these tragedies happen. Either folks say they never saw it coming, that they couldn't imagine that the person would go off the deep end like they did, or we hear something to the effect, yeah, this person has always been kind of troubled. Well, you know somebody, and we all do. We all know somebody whose character is markedly flawed. And the fact is, we can confront that. We can confront that on a daily basis. Character disturbance, this is one of the fundamental aspects of behavior theory that took me a long time as a clinician to embrace. Because I was schooled eclectically. And so I learned all the major schools of thought, and believe me, behaviorism was not my favorite. It was down at the very bottom of the stack. But one of the most basic, almost poetically beautiful tenets behavior theory is behavior persists when it's reinforced. In other words, people keep doing the things, people keep acting in the ways that work for them. that don't encounter condemnation or resistance. In other words, if it's paying off in some way, they're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep doing it. We all know someone with character disturbance. And we can all do our part to confront. We have to call this enemy for what it is. We have to call on each other and call out each other to be better people. All of us. You know, we don't want to judge. We don't want to set ourselves up as some holier than thou kind of person having a sanctimonious attitude. Well, that's not necessary. It's not necessary to play holier than thou, to call out something that you know to be a problem. I can't imagine that a lot of people didn't know how character impaired this young man, Roof, was. And I can't imagine that a lot of people didn't know how dysfunctional that home was. But each of us, you know, we live in our own ivory towers, our own little castles, our own little protected domains. To each his own, we say. And that's great up to a point. And I think it probably would work if we were, as we have been at times in the past. Certainly not always. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We have plenty of periods in our history that we can look back at, and look back at in shame for what we did collectively and as a culture and even individually. But we've also had times where we could look with some pride on who we were in character and what we managed to do, what we managed to step up to, stand up for. We have had those periods too. And we'll be great again when we have more of those periods. Each and every one of us knows somebody is troubled and is character deficient as this guy, Roof. Truly a loser in this game of life because of the deficiencies in his character. Who thought he would take the cheap, easy way of making himself feel superior and making himself feel powerful by looking with disdain on those he could regard as inferior, and then in cold blood wiping them out? If this is the kind of country that we want, if this is the kind of society we want, if these are the kinds of families we want, if these are the kinds of people we want, then we can stay silent. And we can get mad at all the things that won't fix it. We can get mad at all the rules we don't have, all the laws we don't have yet on the books, all the freedoms that we think need to be further restricted. We can be mad at the weapons that are used. We can be mad about all kinds of things. Earlier in the week, there was another example of somebody who had made pipe bombs. And they were in his truck. And the police had to send a robot to detonate these things. Shall we ban pipes? Shall we ban the ingredients for gunpowder? I think not. We need to focus on like a laser beam on what I know to be the defining issue of our time, and that's character. We are advanced enough now in technology and know-how. We know enough to destroy ourselves many times over. We have enough intelligence and enough awareness to unleash biological agents, chemical agents, deadly viruses that could wipe out hundreds of millions. And all it takes is one sordid character, just one, to perpetrate such a tragedy. No law can protect us from this. Our salvation is in transforming the hearts and minds of our fellow men and women, and in fostering the best we can character development in our young people. And we're not going to do that with the culture we have. So, on this special day, to those of you men who are listening tonight, who have taken this father responsibility seriously, this parental responsibility, and regard it as both a sacred honor and a solemn duty to foster character development in your children, and you are willing to model it, to model the kinds of values and principles that you know that they need to adopt in order to do well in life and to build a great society, to you, my hat is off to you. A big shout out to you. You've earned our respect. Have a happy Father's Day, and I'll see you next week. I'm Dr. George Saman, and this is Character Matters.